Helen, the story of how Helen and I met is actually a perfect story about the Broad Stage. We wanted to be a community-based theater that was here not only for our audience, but also for the artists that live in our community. So I was just trying to remember the first time I saw you here.
Too. Maybe Baryshnikov?
You came to Baryshnikov's opening a year ago, I guess,
yes.
in September. And
I got my tickets myself. I just was minding my own business, going to the theater, and Dale tracked me down and said, "We want you to work here." And I said, "Okay," because when I walked into this space, I kind of couldn't believe that in my neighborhood was such an exquisite place to work. I just kind of couldn't believe it. I went to see Our Town because a dear friend of mine was one of the producers, and I played Emily a few years ago. And so I knew the play was more than people think the play is. You know, people think of it as the thing you did in high school, but even at the age of whatever I was, 23, I remember being backstage, hearing these words and thinking, there's something bigger going on in this play than anything I've heard. So now cut to me at this age with a daughter and higher stakes in my life, and I went to see this show and thought, really, Our Town? Okay. And I sat down, and by the middle of the first act, I thought, because the house lights were up for the good part of the show, and I thought, what's going to happen if I start uncontrollably sobbing in the middle of the first act? People usually are sobbing in the third act in this play. I found it unforgiving, unrelenting, funny, immediate, relevant, beyond relevant. So it was one of the most profound theater-going experiences I've ever had, and I've been going to the theater for a long time. So I called Dale and said, you should see this. And then cut to, I don't know how...
A couple months later, I guess.
Well, more than that, maybe close to a year later, I had fawned all over the director backstage. I really thought, sort of in the tradition of Austin Pendleton or Andre Gregory, this is the kind of work I love, unadorned, right to the bone of the piece. And he called and said, want to play the stage manager? And I'm, okay. I didn't know how terrifying it would be when I said yes. When I walked out there the first time in New York to do it, I can't remember in my whole career being as nervous as I was walking out in front of these 150 people and simply talking to them about what it means to be alive. Didn't quite factor in how scary that would be. But I got to do this play and play this extraordinary part. And then as I flew back home, I thought, I'm not done. I'm not done saying those words. It was such a nourishing thing for me, for my life, to hear the play every night, much less get to say those words. So I called Dale and said, what do you think?
I was thinking about how we know it, and many of us grew up seeing Our Town or doing it in high school, but there hasn't really been a major production of it in a long time, since David Cromer's is really the first one for a while. But also that if you're 30 or younger, you may never have seen it. So I'm very excited about the opportunity of bringing it to our younger audiences, because it's one of those plays that's just about what it is to be alive and human, and it's really hard to explain what David does and how special it is.
I can only say that when I left there, I was desperate for everyone I knew and cared about to see it, and so I actually brought it here to make it easier for them. Yeah, even if I had never been asked to be in it, it was among the most incredible things I'd ever seen in my life. Yeah, this exquisite theater is in my neighborhood, and this is my favorite play, and I'm playing one of the great parts ever written, so it's a pretty exciting moment for me. I just looked at it and thought, you know, the stage manager sometimes just describes what's going on stage and sometimes dares to talk about things like life and love and death and the hereafter, and I thought, what's going to give me the authority to talk about that? And then as I started to look at it, I thought, my life as an artist and my life as a mother, it's as if it was written for a woman, when I read it anyway. Yes, but I played it in New York, and my stepson, I told him that when I left the show that a man was coming in to take over, and he said, a man's going to play that part? So I loved the fact that for his whole life, his imprint will be that the stage manager is a woman. Yeah, well, the end of the play is really between the stage manager and Emily, so when I talked to her, it was very meaningful for me, you know, time going by and everything.